When I used to tell my friends that I was designing pinball machines, for every reaction that I got that was like, oh cool, I also got like a guy with a big foam core question mark over his head going, you know, what how can you possibly, I mean, what is there to design? I mean, what, you know, they would say, pinball machines, you know, what exactly are you designing? And so to convey to them what it is that a modern pinball game was, and all of the level of technology, the depth of design that goes into that particular device, and most people are oblivious to this completely. Right, well, this is essentially the starting point of every pinball game. It's essentially a piece of material that's roughly, in the Williams days, it was the old playfields were 46 inches long. In the case of Revenge, much to everyone's chagrin, it became 43 inches long, primarily to accommodate a smaller cabinet. But so this is, you know, it's essentially a blank sheet of paper, and we go from this to eventually this, which is a fully populated playfield that represents everything that it needs to in order for it to be manufactured. This, as I think I spoke of before, has traditionally been done in AutoCAD. At Stern Pinball, the last remaining pinball company in the world, they have moved on to much more sophisticated CAD implementations that allow them to view things and manipulate things in 3 dimensions. But back when Revenge was being designed, this was the state of the art, which was essentially AutoCAD. This is representative of the mechanism that is the lift ramp that launches the ball into the air in Revenge from Mars. We have along here, you can see this blue line is a steel rail that follows what at Williams was called a loop shot. At Stern, it's called an orbit, which basically is a shot that comes around, all the way around, gets delivered to the flipper. In a lot of my games, I try to make that a repeatable shot because it feels good to the player to make that shot back to back again and again. Another feature in a lot of my games is a feature that I took from Steve Ritchie, which is the crossing ramps feature. In Terminator 2, he had these two great a left ramp and a right ramp with controlled feeds back to the flipper. What that means is that when you made this shot, which came off of the right flipper to the left ramp, the ball was returned directly to feed the left flipper, which in turn could then shoot the right ramp and come back and feed the right flipper. So you had this crossing action of shot, 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 which is not something a novice will be able to do immediately, but it's something that is very satisfying to an advanced player. Shots for the novice are typically located in the center of the playfield because a novice cannot tell where the ball will go relative to where the ball is on the flipper. And every shot in pinball is really only about where the ball is relative to where it is on the flipper when the flipper is actuated. Shots in the center are easy to make because there is a broad area wherein a novice, almost no matter what he does, is when he tends to flip early as opposed to late, because he's afraid that if he flips late, he will drain the ball between the flippers. Shots that are a little bit riskier are shots that come off of the tip of the flipper, and those shots are the shots that are along the edges of the playfield. So these orbits that we talk about are typically more difficult shots than shots in the center of the playfield. The same thing with the ramps. The other thing that is very that affects those shots a lot is how much of a lead-in those shots have. A lead-in is basically an exposed section of the ball guide. So the reason that the lead-in helps make the shot easier is because a shot coming off the flipper has the opportunity to strike the guide here and then get reflected such that it continues to reflect up the ball guide until eventually it begins to hug the outside edge of the guide and comes around smoothly. The other thing that happens relative to this lead-in is that it's very critical where you put it relative to feeding the flipper. If the designer is not careful with the position of this ball guide, the ball comes around here, hits the rubber as opposed to going directly to the flipper down here. So I pay a lot of attention to where I position that guide typically in order to give the player a decent shot at the ball once it comes around. You know what's interesting about Revenge from Mars? Revenge from Mars, and I was just talking to Keith Johnson, who was one of the programmers on the game, doing game modes not too long ago, and Keith and I were talking about the fact that when the Whitewood first went into his room, that he thought it was one of the best flowing games he had ever shot. And that when we shipped the game, it was no longer one of the best flowing games he had ever shot. And we were talking about this because the playfield didn't change, but the things that we had to do with the ball in order to communicate the message or get the story across or make the mode work meant that we were constantly holding the ball. So we were like, do this thing, hold the ball, okay, shoot at this, or give you the ball back, etc. Whereas if you took that playfield and turned off the video and turned off all of the things, it rocked. It just totally rocked. I'm very sensitive to that. That's always been one of the things that has always been, well, in the last 3 games, it's been an argument. It has caused arguments with the programmers because they have their need to, do a display effect or communicate something, and so they want to stop the ball. And I have always wanted really open playfields. That you mentioned that the zen of pinball, that kind of like state you get into when every shot flows and every shot transition. That's when I lay out a playfield. That's where I'm at in terms of this is why I envision, okay, this one comes around and then it comes back and then it hooks up to that shot, and then imagine it goes over here and it transitions over here, and I try to keep that going as long as I can. And that's how I design them. That's how I lay them out. Now, somewhere along the way, we need to add variety within a limited architecture. And so a variety within a limited architecture means if the ball goes in here, I have to invent 3 different ways for the ball to come out. So I need a random way, I need a feedback to the flipper, and maybe I need another way where I hold it and feed it to something else. I have the standard 7-shot array that makes up a modern pinball machine. Is controlled by the fact that I'm working inside of a piece of wood that's 20 1/4 inches wide. How many things can we transform the standard 7-shot array into? There's a lot of guys that don't work around the 7-shot array. I don't think Pat Lawler works around the 7-shot array. I think Pat Lawler puts stuff wherever he wants and then works the shots from that. I couldn't lay out a playfield his way. I don't relate to that thought process. And I admire that he does, because I'm always surprised by the stuff he does. Steve Ritchie's stuff, I'm seldom surprised at, because it's a lot more like what I think. So it's like when I see his stuff, I go, oh yeah, I understand. Oh yeah, that's obvious. Okay, I get it. Doesn't mean I don't like him. It just means that I relate better to the design thought behind where things are placed and how they transition, and where the exits are and where the entrances are and all that stuff. Whenever we show you a movie, whenever we want to give you information, if it's significant enough, we try to hold the ball. In this particular place, in playfield, there are several places to hold the ball. there is an area right here. It's essentially a hole in the playfield. The ball goes below the playfield and is held there. There is a popper that allows me to eject the ball back, but I have control of that popper, so I put the ball there, I show you what I want to show you, and then I flash a light above that popper to cue you that the ball is coming back out, and then I launch the ball back. I also have, there's an area over here beneath the playfield. There's a thing called a diverter. A diverter is this blue thing right here. It's essentially a piece of steel that's been formed that way. And that piece of steel pivots right here. There's a mechanism that allows it to open and close like a door. So when it is in the open position, the ball is allowed to enter right here and continue around and be delivered someplace else. But when it is in the closed position, it actually, or in the other position, I guess either position is open at some point in time. I move the ball, I move the diverter such that it's in this orientation as opposed to this orientation. When the ball is shot in there, it gets reflected in this direction, gets dropped into a trough, and now I am holding the ball. I then take that ball, I can deliver that ball up to a ramp, which is what I do in Revenge from Mars. But while I'm holding the ball there, I can do a variety of shows. In this particular case, all of the multi-balls in, not all of the multi-balls, the main multi-ball in Revenge from Mars, the balls are essentially cued there. Multi-balls have been handled many different ways. In the old days, one of the very first multi-balls that of note, Black Knight multi-ball, Steve Ritchie's game, the ball was physically held and displayed to the player in a position on the playfield such that he was staging the event by physically seeing the ball in that position, and then the next ball in that position, and then finally when you got the third ball into that position, the game released all the balls and it was multi-ball time. In the modern times, with the advent of auto plungers, an auto plunger is at the entrance of the game. Traditionally, there was what everyone remembers as the ball is fed into the in lane and into the shooter lane, and it is held there, and then there was a spring-loaded plunger which you pulled to get the ball in play. In the early 90s, Steve decided, let's put a coil there so that we can actually control when the ball is fired at times other than when the player also physically launches the ball. So with the advent of the auto plunger, it became less necessary to physically hold the ball on the playfield in order to create multi-ball, because I could score the shot, and then I didn't have to necessarily hold the ball there, because in memory I remembered you scored one light, I'm holding that light, I can do anything I want with that ball. You scored two lights, I hold the light, I return the ball, and then eventually you score the third light, and now I can take, with the auto plunger, I can feed as many balls as I want onto the playfield to create a multi-ball. So therein lies the difference between the traditional, literally physically hold the ball on the playfield, which is a very attractive thing actually. I did it in Johnny Mnemonic, on the Matrix. I liked the notion of seeing my progression by seeing the ball held in a certain position on the playfield. But the auto plunger does create some flexibility in how you handle a multi-ball. When I have a virtual situation, I could say multi-ball is a ramp shot if I wanted to. Make this ramp 3 times, and after the third shot up the ramp, I will release a multi-ball. So there is some functional, cost-saving, etc., if you will, to the auto plunger controlled multi-balls. When he does drain, if you've done your job right, the game, the player feels like he made the mistake. He does not feel like the game took the ball away from him. A lot of people think that we put, we put magnets in to suck the ball out and stuff. That's not true at all. When the ball drains on by its own, as virtue of its own physics. What happens, we do use magnets, but typically we've actually used magnets to keep the ball on the playfield. As a save when the ball is about to drain, we've used magnets in a lot of other ways to create randomization in open areas of the playfield, like the Addams Family, and to hold the ball in other places. We use it to power the ball and accelerate the ball. We've used electromagnets in a lot of different ways. These are the three targets that interact with objects that are positioned virtually here in the center of the playfield. And the reason this is angled this way is to create some friendlier reflections of the ball. So the ball would come in, hit this target, reflect to this target, reflect to this target, and come back. As opposed to what I was trying to do is, if you create a wall of straight targets going straight across, it will appear that the ball is coming straight back at you. And so in order to minimize that, that is why these targets are positioned this way. This target, I allowed it to be directly facing the player because, as you can see, it is offset from the position of the flipper. So it is less dangerous. Balancing the amount of times that the ball drains out the left, right, and the center of the playfield is one of the things that a designer plays with in order to control what we call ball times. Remember that these games are designed to go on the street and earn money, and the way they earn money is they keep you entertained, and yet they keep you putting quarters into them. So when you play the game for an hour on one quarter, the guy who's operating the game is not making any money. And what we try to do is we balance the relationship between your fun and his earnings.